You know, it's around that time in the offseason. The NFL draft is over. There's not going to be a lot of news coming out. And the NFL schedule is about to be released. So everybody's going to be releasing their predictions. And however, even though the schedule hasn't officially been released yet, there have already been people giving out predictions, and I've seen a lot of people picking Pittsburgh once again to finish in last place in the AFC North and to have their first losing record in decades. And I don't understand why people continue to sleep on Pittsburgh. Like, you slept on Pittsburgh last season. What was the narrative about the Steelers last offseason going into the 2021 NFL season? Oh, the roster's too old. Big Ben is aging. He's regressing. They don't have a great offensive line. They're not going to make it into the postseason. Well, Pittsburgh made it into the postseason as a 7th seed. What about the season before that? What about 2020, right? The year where Big Ben was coming off his season-ending elbow injury. Everybody was saying, you don't know what to expect from Big Ben. We know he's getting up there in age. He's regressing. On top of that, there were a lot of question marks when it came to the playmakers that the Steelers had on the offensive side of the football. However, Pittsburgh, despite people picking them to finish amongst one of the worst in the AFC North, they ended up winning the whole entire division and making it into the postseason, where they were defeated by the Cleveland Browns in the wild card round. And we already know how that season went. They started out really good, undefeated, and then things just fell apart from there. However, you look at Pittsburgh going into this season, this is probably one of the best teams that the Pittsburgh Steelers have put on the field since 2016, 2017 maybe, because this is one of the youngest rosters in the NFL. And it's really weird because the thing that the Pittsburgh Steelers have been knocked off about for the previous years in the past have been the fact that the roster was old, the roster was aging, and they needed to get younger. Well, what did Pittsburgh do? They got younger on the offensive side of the football. They got younger on the offensive line. As a matter of fact, the majority of the Pittsburgh Steelers roster and the majority of their starters are either 26 years of age or younger, despite the fact that, you have a couple of outliers there. We already know you have Cam Hayward there, who's like in his 30s. You have a couple of players on the Steelers team who is going to be starting, who is up there in age. But the majority of their roster is at least 26 years of age or younger, making them one of the youngest teams in the NFL. And not every team is going to have a team full of young players. Like, there's going to be at least one or two starters who are going to be there who are going to be up there in age. And you kind of need those guys. You need vets in the locker room. However, when you look at Pittsburgh, man, you look at the additions that they made this offseason, I think that it's fair to say that Pittsburgh had one of the best offseasons in the NFL this year, because you bring in one of the best offensive linemen in free agency and offensive guard, James Daniels, who was the best offensive lineman for the Chicago Bears last season. He's going to improve the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line tremendously. On top of that, you also have Kevin Dotson, who's going to be back into the starting lineup. He's pretty solid when he's able to stay healthy. The big concerns that the Pittsburgh Steelers have on the offensive line is going to be from your two starting offensive tackles. You have Chuks Okorafor starting at right tackle, and you have Dan Moore expected to start at left tackle. Now, both of these guys have kind of been developmental projects for Pittsburgh. They kind of been like late round picks that have kind of been developed by the Steelers, and now they're finally getting the opportunity to show what they can do and how far along they have came in their development. So Steeler fans don't really know how good your tackle play is going to be. It's one of the biggest questions going into this season for the Steelers, because it's going to be boom or bust. The Steelers offensive tackle play is either going to be pretty good or really bad. Don't really know what to expect from it. But then you look at the other positions. You look at the skill position. You have Deontay Johnson coming off a breakout year. You draft George Pickens in the second round out of the University of Georgia, who is my favorite wide receiver from this past year's NFL draft. You also have Chase Claypool. You draft Calvin Austin, who most likely is going to be your slot receiver / gadget guy, who's going to be the guy who's going to be sent in motion the majority of the times in this new offense that the offensive coordinator wants to run in Matt Canada. He wasn't really able to run the kind of style of offense last season that he wanted to run because of the limitations with Big Ben due to age and whatnot. So now you draft Kenny Pickett. Your offense is pretty much complete outside of offensive tackle. Like Kenny Pickett is set up to succeed. You got a lot of talent and depth at the wide receiver position. You have an offensive line that is going to be better this season compared to what it was last year. Let's not also forget about Najee Harris, who was the best rookie running back in the NFL last season. He did it all for Pittsburgh. He was a threat running the football, but he also was a really phenomenal option when it came to catching passes out of the backfield. And there were times where Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson were the only two players who are really able to get things going offensively. But you also have tight end Pat Friarmuth, who also had a pretty solid rookie season. Now, his rookie season kind of got overshadowed because of how great Kyle Pitts was and how dominant his rookie season was. Probably the most dominant rookie year that we've ever seen out of a first-year tight end. However, Pat Friarmuth had a pretty productive rookie year, and a lot of people are expecting him to have a breakout season this year. He's had a lot of comparisons to Heath Miller. And remember, Heath Miller wasn't, a super dynamic tight end. He wasn't flashy, but he was really consistent, really reliable, and he was a great security blanket for Big Ben in third down situations where he needed to keep the drive alive. And I think Pat Friarmuth could most definitely develop into a similar Heath Miller kind of player with more athletic upside because he's a way better athlete than what Heath Miller was. No knock on Heath Miller, it's just that you look at the measurables and you look at the combine metrics, Pat Friarmuth is a better athlete than what Heath Miller was. Then you look at the defense side of the football, like the Steelers do have one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. Now, well, not college football, excuse me, I mean the NFL. But hopefully Stephon Tuitt returns, because if Stephon Tuitt returns, things are going to be incredibly dangerous, because then you're going to have Tyson Alualu, you're going to have Chris Wormley, who had a pretty productive season last year, and you're going to have them playing alongside Cam Hayward, who seems to be getting better with age. It seems like the older he gets, the better he gets. Then you have TJ Watt, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. At cornerback, you brought in Levi Wallace, coming off the best season of his NFL career with the Buffalo Bills, when he had to kind of step up and be that number one corner in certain situations because of the season-ending injury that star cornerback Tre'Davious White suffered. Then the safety position, you bring back Terrell Edmonds, which a lot of Steelers fans, myself included, weren't all that thrilled about. I was really hoping that we could sign Tyrann Mathieu, but Terrell Edmonds has been pretty solid over the last 2 seasons. He definitely has came a long way. He's a better player now compared to what he was when he was first drafted by Pittsburgh. And he's only signed to a 1-year deal. So if he's trying to get a big time contract, he's going to have to perform at an elite level. But Terrell Edmonds, to his credit, has been at least average or above average over the last 2 years. He hasn't been trash, and he's definitely worth bringing back. Definitely Pittsburgh doesn't lose anything by bringing him back and starting him, because, he's not going to play bad. His play has been pretty solid for the most part over the last couple of seasons. So when you look at this Pittsburgh Steelers roster overall, this team got better. You look at linebacker, you brought in Myles Jack. Outside of last year, which I don't know what the heck happened, he was pretty much a top 5 linebacker in the game. Then Jacksonville hires Urban Meyer, and Urban Meyer kind of, disappoints and kind of gets fired during the middle of his tenure with the Jacksonville Jaguars in his first season. So Myles Jack kind of suffered because he had bad coaching. Now he's going to Pittsburgh. He's going to be with Mike Tomlin, Brian Flores. He's going to bounce back. Also, you're going to have Devin Bush, who's also going to be playing alongside of Myles Jack. Now, we don't know if Devin Bush is going to be bounced back because, the Devin Bush that we saw post ACL injury, kind of hope we don't see that again. And honestly, I expect Devin Bush to bounce back, because normally it kind of takes a while to bounce back into the swing of things when you're coming off an ACL injury. You have to learn to trust your body again. And that first year back, you're never really back. You're still trying to get back into the flow of the game and whatnot. So for Devin Bush, I definitely will be expecting him to bounce back this season, and he probably may not play up to the level that he was playing at when the Steelers first drafted him, when he first came into the league for the first couple of years prior to his ACL injury. However, hopefully he can play a lot better than what he did last season for the Steelers. Like, he couldn't cover, he kind of was a little bit slow getting to the ball in certain instances. So hopefully Devin Bush is able to bounce back, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't bounce back. But the Steelers also do have a lot of depth when it comes to the linebacker position, when it comes to the defensive line. Now, the biggest concern probably is going to be the cornerback position for Pittsburgh, because yeah, you do have Levi Wallace, but if you are somebody who's not a Steelers fan and you don't really follow the Pittsburgh Steelers all that heavily, you're probably going to look up the Pittsburgh Steelers depth chart. You're going to scroll down to the cornerback position. And you're going to say, okay, like, I know who Levi Wallace is, but who is Ahkello Weatherspoon? Well, Ahkello Weatherspoon was probably the second best cornerback that the Steelers had on their roster last season, behind Joe Hayden. And a lot of Steelers fans were kind of wondering, like, was he going to get re-signed because he had a really great season? Like, it wouldn't make any sense for the Steelers not to bring him back. So he's coming back to Pittsburgh. He had a really fantastic 2021 season. A lot of Steelers fans are excited about what he could do this season. So the Steelers defense on paper should still remain one of the best in the league. That shouldn't have changed. However, how much is the offense going to improve from last season to this season? Because the play calling wasn't all that great. And on top of that, the quarterback play kind of wasn't all that great at times. Even though Big Ben did what he could, he played to the best of his ability. Sometimes he kind of costed the Pittsburgh Steelers games because of his inability to, take care of the football in certain instances. And sometimes he just didn't really have the arm strength that he used to have when he was in his prime. And then on top of that, the offensive coordinator situation, like, we all wanted Matt Canada to not return. However, he's returning, and it was expected by most people that Matt Canada would return because, he's going to have the chance to run his offense with a different quarterback, with a different skill set that's more mobile. And what Matt Canada wants to do is he wants to do a lot of jet sweeps. He kind of wants to have a lot of motion going on to kind of get the defense a little bit confused and caught off guard. And, to his credit, like, Matt Canada, had a lot of bad play calls that weren't really all that great, but he also had a couple of okay moments. Not a lot of okay moments, but he had a couple of signs of brilliancy, but not really all that often. So for Pittsburgh, going into this season, a lot of people are probably going to say, okay, JT, like, you gave us the rundown on the Steelers roster or whatnot, but I mean, like, who is, like, are the Steelers better than the Bengals? Are they better than the Ravens? Are they better than the Browns? Like, I think that the Steelers are better than the Cleveland Browns. As a matter of fact, like, the Browns still have a couple of holes. Like, they have to find another pass rusher alongside of Myles Garrett. I don't really think the interior of their defensive line is all that great. As a matter of fact, I think the Steelers defensive line probably may be the best in the AFC North. You look at the linebacker play that Cleveland has kind of had over the last couple of years. Hasn't been bad, but definitely could be better. But you do have J.O.K. there, who should take the next step, end up becoming a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker. And then the Browns probably have the best secondary in this division, or at least tied for the best secondary in this division with the Baltimore Ravens. But offensively, like, Cleveland is still lacking when it comes to depth at the wide receiver position. You don't really know what else you're going to be getting from that wide receiver group outside of Amari Cooper. You do have Donovan's People-Jones and whatnot, but I mean, like, there's still a lot to be proven from the wide receivers of the Browns outside of Amari. Their offensive line is still really good. Deshaun Watson, eager to see what's going to happen with him. It's expected that he should play this year. Then you got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, probably the best 1-2 punch in the whole entire NFL. However, there's going to be a team from this division that ends up disappointing and not living up to expectations. There's going to be a team that ends up, kind of missing out. I don't think the Steelers are going to be that team. And a lot of people make the mistake of judging teams strictly based off talent. And, talent does win games. You're not going to win a Super Bowl having the worst roster in the NFL. However, a lot of people don't take coaching into account when they do their predictions. A lot of people just go off talent. And in the NFL, you don't win games strictly based off talent. You got to have the talent and you got to have the proper coaching to bring it all together. I don't know if you guys remember who the master clapper is, but Jason Garrett, I call him the master clapper because all he really did was clap his hands and underachieve during his time as a head coach with the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, with Jason Garrett as their head coach, they always were one of the most talented teams roster-wise, but when it came to their performance on the field, they weren't always the most well-coached team, and they got out-coached more times than not. You look at Mike Tomlin still is the best head coach in this division, and that does mean something. When you have a great head coach, you have a head coach that's able to make adjustments, you have a coach that's able to get guys motivated, playing better than what they typically would play. So you look at Mike Tomlin, he's still the best head coach in the AFC North. And you can make the argument and say that Mike Tomlin has been coaching some of the best football that he has ever coached during his career as a head coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like the last 3 seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers have overexceeded expectations. You go back to, the previous year. Nobody expected Pittsburgh to make it to the postseason. Pittsburgh snuck in. Same thing can be said about 2020. Pittsburgh won the division. So you look at Mike Tomlin. If you need a reason to have faith in the Pittsburgh Steelers, have faith in Mike Tomlin. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, JT hasn't really done much in the playoffs and whatnot. The Steelers have low-key done a quiet rebuild. Think about it. 2 or 3 years ago, the Steelers had a lot of aging veterans on both sides of the football. The offensive line was really old. The defense, although it wasn't super old, still had a couple of old pieces there that needed to be replaced. And then in the span of 2 years, the Pittsburgh Steelers roster goes from, a little bit up there in age to one of the youngest in the whole entire NFL. So with the Steelers having one of the youngest rosters in the NFL and having Kenny Pickett, if Kenny Pickett ends up being the quarterback that the Pittsburgh Steelers hope that he is when they drafted him, the Pittsburgh Steelers should be in that Super Bowl conversation within 2 or 3 years. Because when you look at teams who are winning Super Bowls right now, the teams that are having the most success are the teams that are winning with their quarterbacks playing on young rookie contracts. So if Kenny Pickett playing on a rookie deal, that still leaves Pittsburgh with a lot of flexibility when it comes to their cap space. Now you're still going to have to try to find a way to get Minka Fitzpatrick locked up long term, but I think that's going to end up happening. And when you look at Pittsburgh this season, I think a lot of people are really sleeping on this team. And I'm not saying that Pittsburgh is going to be a playoff team and whatnot. All I'm saying is that I strongly doubt that Pittsburgh is going to have a losing season. And I strongly doubt that Pittsburgh is going to finish in last place of the AFC North. And I know a lot of people are still going to keep asking, who are the Steelers better than? It doesn't really matter. You can have a better team than Pittsburgh, but are you going to be more well coached than Pittsburgh? Just saying. So, you look at the roster, the Steelers roster is actually really good, and it's not overrated, because I know my guy Juicler is going to say, JT, you're overrating the Steelers roster. Obviously, I'm not. If the majority of people out there are picking Pittsburgh to finish in last place in this division and to have a losing season, that means that the majority of people aren't high on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster. So if anything, I view the Pittsburgh Steelers roster as underrated. You can't call something overrated when people are saying that the Steelers are going to be are going to have the worst record in this division. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, because if people are overrating the Steelers roster, they would project them to finish a lot higher than last place in the AFC North. So you look at Pittsburgh, man, it's really frustrating how many people disrespect this team year in and year out. People don't respect the consistency. You know, like a lot of people just get attracted to flash. They get attracted to whoever's playing quarterback. You know, that's another thing that people are going to say. Oh, JT, you got the worst quarterback in the division. Doesn't freaking matter as long as you have a quarterback that's good enough to get the job done. There's no way you can tell me that the Steelers can do anything worse than what they had from the quarterback position last season. On top of that, you can't do no worse than what you had in 2019. The Steelers went 8-8 with Mason Rudolph and Devlin Doug Hodges as their starting quarterbacks that season. So I'm pretty sure Kenny Pickett won't be no worse than Mason Rudolph, and I'm pretty sure he should at least be better than the aging and regressing Big Ben Roethlisberger. Now, this is just wishful thinking and hopeful assumptions, but if we're being realistic, Kenny Pickett should be pretty solid. He has a pretty solid supporting cast around him. He's going to have Najee. He's going to have Deontay Johnson and a lot of other weapons in the pass game to throw the football to. The offensive line has improved. However, the offensive tackle spot makes things really rocky. However, Kenny Pickett should be better than what Big Ben was last season. He should be able to win Pittsburgh a couple of more games this season that they weren't able to win last year because of the quarterback play that held them back. So, like, I really don't understand why people continue to sleep on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, I do understand, because a lot of people don't take coaching into account. You get what I'm saying? Like last season, not too many people had the Patriots making it to the postseason. They were still saying the Patriots don't have a great roster. And I was saying, hey, man, like, I know the Patriots don't have a great roster, but they have Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches in the history of football and the greatest coach in NFL history. So when you look at Bill Belichick, you look at how great of a coach he is, his ability to make adjustments and whatnot, that's going to elevate the team. And a lot of people don't take coaching into account when they do their predictions. And I still feel like a lot of people aren't really taking the Mike Tomlin effect into account. And on top of that, you know, Kevin Stefanski still has a lot to prove because he mismanaged the situation with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland last season. That's what a lot of people don't really talk about. They want to blame everything on Baker. But, I mean, when the Browns were playing the Packers, right, and they were having success running the football, you know what they did? They stopped running the football, and they opted to throw the football. Even though they were having success running the football, it was no reason to change your philosophy and change your approach and just go from dominating running the football to throwing the football. It just made no sense. I understand that you got to throw the football from time to time and whatnot to keep the defense off balance, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And on top of that, why would the Cleveland Browns start Baker Mayfield when he wasn't 100%? Why not just start Case Keenum? The difference between the talent gap and Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum isn't all that big. So I'm pretty sure that, you know, a healthy Case Keenum gives you a better chance to win than a 80 to 70% Baker Mayfield. Like, the Browns could have easily been able to stay afloat in the playoff race and whatnot and keep their season alive if they would have allowed Baker Mayfield a couple of more weeks to rest and get back healthy, and they would have been just fine with Case Keenum as their quarterback, because there's no way you're going to be able to convince me that a healthy Case Keenum was going to play worse than a injured and banged up Baker Mayfield. So for Kevin Stefanski, the jury's still out on him. He still has a lot that he has to prove. And even John Harbaugh, like, Greg Roman is still the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. And the Baltimore Ravens passing attack still hasn't evolved. And if the Ravens are ever going to make it to the Super Bowl and live up to their lofty Super Bowl, expectations, they're going to have to get more out of the passing game. And Greg Roman is going to have to, kind of add some new wrinkles to his offense. And Greg Roman is somebody who specializes in the run game. The passing game isn't really his specialty. So there are many teams in this division who could disappoint. And I know that the division was kind of a little bit different because of the injuries that Baltimore went through and Cleveland went through and whatnot. But Pittsburgh got better this year. And a lot of teams in this division got better. However, you have to take into account that the Steelers still do have the best head coach in this division. And as long as you have a solid roster and you have an elite head coach, you're going to be able to remain in the playoff conversation. You're going to remain afloat. It's just hard to see Pittsburgh finishing in fourth place in this division. Really can't see it happening. I feel like one team outside of Pittsburgh is going to disappoint in this division. And I definitely feel like if I had to bet money, it could be the Cleveland Browns. Now, I'm not saying that Steelers are going to make the playoffs or anything. I'm just saying that I don't think that Pittsburgh is going to have a losing season, and I definitely don't feel like they're going to end up being the worst team in this division. And it's hard seeing really any team in the AFC North finishing in last place in this division, which is why a lot of people are going with Pittsburgh, because it's the more safer pick. It's the more easier guess to make. But if you actually go ahead and you do your research and whatnot, you will see that teams that have elite head coaches with at least solid rosters more times than not end up having pretty solid seasons and at least winning at least 8 games. And I think that Pittsburgh this season, if they were able to win 9 games last season with having 0 offense, like the Steelers' best player, you know who was the MVP of the Steelers' offense last season? Chris Boswell. Chris Boswell was pretty much the second or the third best weapon that the Steelers had on offense outside of Deontay Johnson and Najee Harris. So anytime your kicker is your top 3 weapon on offense and your top 3 scoring option, not really good. It says a lot about your offense. And I know I sound like a hypocrite because I was just criticizing Greg Roman and whatnot about his play calling and his offense. But I mean, the same thing can be said about Matt Canada. I'm not saying that Pittsburgh is this flawless football team. All I'm saying is that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be a way better football team this season than what a lot of people are giving them credit for. And I've said the same thing about Pittsburgh for like the last 2 seasons. Like, I've made this video for 3 straight years in a row? And I haven't been wrong yet. And I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for Pittsburgh to end up finishing in last place in the AFC North. I'm still waiting for Pittsburgh to have their first losing season in almost It's been 2 decades since Pittsburgh last had a losing season? I'm still waiting for it to happen. Still hasn't happened. And I don't think it's going to happen, at least this season, with the improvements that the Steelers have made and with Mike Tomlin being the head coach. I know Mike Tomlin hasn't really done that much in the postseason. However, you can't ignore the job that Mike Tomlin has done over the last 3 years, because anytime you have a team that continues to exceed expectations and prove people wrong, you got to give the head coach credit for that. Like, you have to give Mike Tomlin credit for that. Because if Mike Tomlin had, 2 losing seasons, then everybody would be on his head. But yet, we don't really give Mike Tomlin his props. Give Mike Tomlin his roses. Like, I hope y'all ain't see that. But we got to give Mike Tomlin his flowers, man. Like, the guy has been doing a phenomenal job coaching. Like, the dude has been getting the most out of every single player on this team. Like, if Mike Tomlin wasn't the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would agree with everybody picking Pittsburgh to finish in last place in this division. But the Mike Tomlin effect is definitely real. And even though you guys might not see it, it's going to show. And if you guys go back and you look at the preseason expectations that everybody had for Pittsburgh and what they ended up doing at the end of the season, they ended up surprising everybody. So, I mean, like, you got to give Mike Tomlin a lot of props. He has been coaching some of the best football during his head coaching career over the last 3 years that he has ever done during his whole entire career in Pittsburgh. But don't sleep on the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. That's all I'm really trying to say. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs. I'm not saying, they're going to be the best team in the league or whatnot. All I'm saying is that I feel like a lot of people, their expectations on Pittsburgh are really, really low. And they need to, kind of reevaluate the roster and whatnot. Like, I don't really know, man. Like, I honestly don't. I'm honestly done made this video so many times. Like, I'm just kind of running out of different things to say because, like, it's the same thing every year. Like, you really can't convince people initially that Pittsburgh is going to be a solid team. Like, you look at Pittsburgh and you look at their roster, a lot of people judge teams based off roster. They don't really take into account the coaching and other outside factors that influence how good a season that a team could have. So it's really hard, me being a Steelers fan, trying to convince people why you shouldn't sleep on Pittsburgh, because a lot of people are just going to make the argument and say that, well, their roster, although they have improved, JT, is not as good as the Bengals, the Browns, or the Ravens. But, it just is what it is. It's just a wait and see approach. But I have a strong suspicion that the Steelers are going to once again continue to exceed expectations unless something catastrophic happens. So let me know what you guys think about the Pittsburgh Steelers going into the upcoming 2022 NFL season. Do you feel like people are sleeping on the Pittsburgh Steelers, or do you feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers are actually going to end up finally having their first losing season in decades and finishing in last place in the AFC North?